The Galoshes of Fortune by Hans Christian Andersen, published in 1838. Part 4. A Great Moment and a Most Extraordinary Journey. Everyone in Copenhagen knows what the entrance to Frederick's Hospital looks like, but as some of the people who read this story may not have been to Copenhagen, we must describe the building briefly. The hospital is fenced off from the street by a rather high railing of heavy iron bars, which are spaced far enough apart, at least so the story goes, for very thin interns to squeeze between them and pay little visits to the world outside. The part of the body they had the most difficulty in squeezing through was the head. In this, as often happens in the world, small heads were the most successful. So much for our description. One of the young interns, of whom it could be said that he had a great head only in a physical sense, had the night watch that evening. Outside the rain poured down. But in spite of these difficulties, he was bent upon getting out for a quarter of an hour. There was no need for the doorman to know about it, he thought, if he could just manage to slip through the fence. There lay the galoshes that the watchman had forgotten. And while the intern had no idea that they were galoshes of fortune, he did know that they would stand him in good stead out in the rain, so he pulled them on. Now the question was whether he could squeeze between the bars, a trick that he had never tried before. There he stood facing the fence. "I wish to goodness I had my head through," he said, and though his head was much too large and thick for the space, it immediately slipped through quickly and with the greatest of ease. The galoshes saw to that. All he had to do now was to squeeze his body through after his head, but it wouldn't go. "Ugh," he panted. "I'm too fat. I thought my head would be the worst difficulty. No, I shall never get through." He quickly attempted to pull his head back again, but it couldn't be done. He could move his neck easily, but that was all. First, his anger flared up. Then his spirit dropped down to zero. The galoshes of fortune had gotten him into a terrible fix, and unluckily it did not occur to him to wish his way out of it. No, instead of wishing, he struggled and strove, but he could not budge from the spot. The rain poured down, not a soul could be seen in the street, and he could not reach the bell by the gate. How could he ever get free? He was certain he would have to stay there till morning, and then they would have to send for a blacksmith to file through the iron bars. It would take time. All the boys in the school across the way would be up and shout, and the entire population of Nyboder, where all the sailors lived, would turn out for the fun of seeing a man in a pillory. Why, he would draw a bigger crowd than the one that went to see the championship wrestling matches last year. He panted. "The blood's rushing to my head. I'm going mad. Yes, I'm going mad. Oh, if I were only free again and out of this fix, then I would be all right again." This was what he ought to have said in the first place. No sooner had he said it than his head came free, and he dashed indoors, still bewildered by the fright that the galoshes of fortune had given him. But don't think that this was the end of it. No, the worst is yet to come. The night went by, and the next day passed, but nobody came for the galoshes. That evening there was to be a performance at the little theatre in Cannock Street. The house was packed, and in the audience was our friend, the intern, apparently none the worse for his adventure of the night before. He had again put on the galoshes. After all, no one had claimed them, and the streets were so muddy that he thought they would stand him in good stead. At the theatre a new sketch was presented. It was called My Grandmother's Spectacles, and had to do with a pair of eyeglasses that enabled anyone who wore them to read the future from people's faces, just as a fortune-teller reads it from cards. The idea occupied his mind very much. He would like to own such a pair of spectacles. Properly used, they might enable one to see into people's hearts. This, he thought, would be far more interesting than foresee what would happen next year. Future events would be known in due time, but no one would ever know the secrets that lie in people's hearts. "Look at those ladies and gentlemen in the front row," he said to himself. "If I could see straight into their hearts, what stores of things, what great shops full of goods would I behold, and how my eyes would rove about those shops. In every feminine heart, no doubt, I should find a complete millinery establishment. There sits one whose shop is empty, but a good cleaning would do it no harm. And, of course, some of the shops would be well stocked. Ah, me!" He sighed. "I know of one where all the goods are of the very best quality, and it would just suit me. But, alas and alack, there's a shopkeeper there already, and he's the only bad article in the whole shop. Many a one would say, 'Won't you walk in?' and I wish I could." I would pass like a little thought through their hearts. The galoshes took him at his word. The intern shrank to almost nothing, and set out on a most extraordinary journey through the hearts of all the spectators in the first row. The first heart he entered was that of a lady, but at first he mistook it for a room in the orthopedic institution, or hospital, where the plaster casts of deformed limbs are hung upon the wall. The only difference was, at the hospital, those casts were made when the patients came in, while these casts that were kept in the heart were made as the good people departed, for every physical or mental fault of the friends she had lost had been carefully stored away. He quickly passed on to another woman's heart, which seemed like a great holy cathedral. Over the high altar fluttered the white dove of innocence, and the intern would have gone down on his knees except that he had to hurry on to the next heart. However, he still heard the organ roll, and he felt that it had made a new and better man of him, a man not too unworthy to enter the next sanctuary. This was a poor garret where a mother lay ill, but through the windows the sun shone warm and bright. Lovely roses bloomed in the little wooden flower box on the roof, and 2 bluebirds sang of happy childhood, while the sick woman prayed for a blessing on her daughter. Next, the intern crawled on his hands and knees through an overcrowded butcher shop. There was meat, more meat, and meat alone, wherever he looked in his heart of a wealthy, respectable man whose name you can find in the directory. Next, he entered the heart of this man's wife. In an old tumble-down dovecote he found it. Her husband's portrait served as a mere weather vane, which was connected with the doors in such a way that they opened and closed as her husband turned round. Then he found his way into a cabinet of mirrors, such as to be seen at Rosenborg Castle, though in this heart the mirrors had the power of magnifying objects enormously. Like the Grand Lama of Tibet, the owner's insignificant ego sat in the middle of the floor, in admiring contemplation of his own greatness. After this, he seemed to be crammed into a narrow case full of sharp needles. This, he thought, must certainly be an old maid's heart. But it was nothing of the sort. It was the heart of a very young officer who had been awarded several medals, and of whom everyone said, "Now there's a man of both intellect and heart." Quite befuddled was the poor intern when he popped out of the heart of the last person in the front row. He could not get his thoughts in order, and he supposed that his strong imaginations must have run away with him. "Merciful heavens," he groaned. "I must be well on the road to the madhouse, and it's so outrageously hot in here that the blood is rushing to my head." Suddenly he recalled what had happened the night before, when he had jammed his head between the bars of the hospital fence. "That must be what caused it," he decided. "I must do something before it is too late. A Russian bath might be the very thing. I wish I were on the top shelf right now." No sooner said that than he lay on the top shelf of the steam bath, but he was fully dressed down to his shoes and galoshes. He felt the hot drops of condensed steam fall upon him from the ceiling. "Hey!" he cried, and jumped down to take a shower. The attendant cried out too when he caught sight of a fully dressed man in the steam room. However, this intern had enough sense to pull himself together and whisper, "I'm just doing this because of a bet." But the first thing he did when he got back to his room was to put hot plasters on his neck and his back to draw out the madness. Next morning he had a blistered back, and that was all he got out of the galoshes of fortune.